Hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Boucart. I work for Cities, where on a daily basis I coach startups. I have a technical background, but contrary to a lot of presentations here, I'll be non-technical today. And I'll be tackling a topic that is extremely difficult for startups. Basically, extremely difficult for everybody, but for startups in particular. Meaning how to price your stuff. Are there many startups or founders in this room? Couple, at least a couple of them. So that I hope you relate a bit to this challenge of putting a price on your stuff. That is pretty hard. In the coming hour, I will share a lot of stuff that we at Cities research on how startups could determine their price. I'll be upfront with you. There is no silver bullet. There is no one magic formula on how to price your software as a service or your stuff. So I'll give you 11 different methods and a lot of tips and insights. Just my agenda. I'll have to go through a little bit of economics before all the rest follows, because there's a basic understanding of economics you need to have in order to appreciate pricing most. Then I'll show 11 different ways to look at your pricing. I'll talk about a bit of multi-axing prices, especially in online services and software as a service. You find a lot of companies doing that. I'll talk about some pricing strategies, have a short discussion about free versus premium, because frankly, we're probably the only industry in the world, the software industry, where free is like a given almost. For most other businesses, free doesn't exist. And I'll have a bit of Q&A in the end, although probably with a group and an audience as big as this, will be a bit harder. Okay, but let's start a bit with economics one-on-one. Anybody an idea how what this curve means? So it means that at a low price, you'll sell a lot of items. At a much higher price, you'll only sell a few items. Anybody any idea how that curve is called? That's a classical economical thing. No. Demand curve. Indeed, I heard somewhere it's a demand curve. Basically, at a given price point, at a lower price point, more customers will buy from you than when you put the same stuff on a much higher price point. Okay. Now, if you multiply price times the amount of sales you will do, you'll get this curve. This is your revenue curve, right? This is the amount of revenue you will make given you put a thing. Now, it's a very straightforward curve, and most of you are pretty technical and scientific, so you understand that curve. Bottom line is, as a startup, you have no idea how that curve looks for you. A lot of large enterprises don't know that curve either. But especially for you, where everything is new and where your product is maybe unique in its kind, you have no idea how that curve looks like. So it's up to you as a startup, not only to figure out what your product should be and blah blah blah, but also to find that optimal point that maximizes your revenue. So at which price point will my service generate most revenue? If you have a curve like this, where it's pretty broad and where you have a significant audience that would buy from you at 50, but not at 300, at 10 or so, but not at 500 or so, you could even think about segmenting your audience, have a low-end offer, typically a free tier or a very startup or basic tier, and you could also have a much more expensive offer all the way to the right and maximize your revenue there, typically an enterprise offer or something, so that you can even have an optimized curve there. Why is pricing so important? Because pricing determines an awful lot of things in your business, right? Pricing determines your market position. You could be considered cheap, you could be considered expensive. Purely based on the pricing alone, you would consider Apple being a pretty premium and expensive brand. And that's also that's how they put themselves in the market, that's how they position themselves. But they couldn't do that if they would charge €100 for an iPhone, right? That would just not make sense. So your pricing determines your market position. Pricing, of course, influences a lot the buying decision of your customer. People are more hesitant to pay €500 than they are to pay $250 for a similar service. So your price has a strong influence on the buying decision. In the App Store, for example, for games, the default pricing is, let's say, 0, right? Most games in the App Store are free. So if you come up with a game and you charge $1.99, be sure that that will influence the buying decision of a lot of people. It has nothing to do with the intrinsic quality of that game or the fun you have with that game. It's just the price will determine that buying process a lot. Of course, it will influence how you do sales, right? If you have a product that you're offering for €10 a month, say a SaaS product or so, you will have a different sales strategy than when you sell enterprise software, right? Enterprise software with licenses or with budgets of like a couple of €100,000 are sold different than a $5 subscription a month. It will give you, price will determine your distribution channels. If you have lower priced things, typically you will most likely not use a lot of distribution channels. You'll try to manage it all yourself. While if you have large, bigger amounts of money to capture, yeah, then you could also set up a distribution chain with partners and affiliates and blah blah blah, because there's enough money coming in to give every one of the players there a piece of the cake. And last but not least, your pricing will determine how much service you can give. If you sell a contract of €250,000, you can give a bit of service within that things. For $5 a month, I don't pick up the phone. Simply as that, you offer email support or next day ticketing, things like that, but not the full enchilada for support. Okay, so pricing determines a lot of parts for your of your stuff. Now, typically, if you look at a lot of pricing literature, it's a lot about cost. If you say pricing is often determined by cost, which is, if you are into physical goods, where these goods need to be produced and everything, yeah, cost is a very important factor there. But in our industry, we are basically an IP industry. We are a digital industry. Software is pretty intangible. So you need to think more about profit and about, as a startup, how can I improve my margin and how can I improve my profit, and how can I leverage the fact that I can serve my product to a very large audience and work on that sense. Okay. Just a quick note: what is value pricing? Because that's what most startups and most software startups do. Cost pricing is you calculate the costs of what it costs to produce a good. You put a margin, typically industry average margin, depends a bit on the sector, and that's your selling price. Value selling or value pricing in this case, this is something else. This is where you try to determine the stuff that I'm delivering, how much value is that creating value in the minds of your customer, and I want to take part of that value, and that's my price. So that is a completely different way of looking at your price. For us software companies, the cost of delivering an extra copy or adding an extra user to our system is virtually zero. That's just a few records in the database. So cost-based pricing is in our sector very hard to do. Value is something special in the sense that you don't really, as a company, control how a customer perceives your product and what they call value. Value is always from the eyes of your customer, not from the eyes of what you as a developer or as a company are building. And that you have to put yourself into the mind of your customer. So what is it? What do they value? typically they will value your features, the features you have in your product. That's, and I'm a more technical guy as well, I'm not a marketeer. I also tend to think that if I deliver more features, I'll deliver more value. Might completely be different when you look at it from a customer's perspective. So features is one thing. Advantages shifts the discussion already a bit more to your customer and to the head of your customer. So think about what advantages am I offering will the customer have when they use my software, right? What benefits will they have? Benefits are stronger than advantages. A benefit is something they really will get on a surplus, something they really have, they will gain from using your product. And often there's a benefit of the benefit. Even whether you're in B2B or B2C, especially B2B, you're not selling to a company. You're selling to a guy or a girl in a company. Oftentimes, that person, that decision maker, has a personal agenda as well. And if you can also illustrate how buying from you will help that guy or girl in the company and will have an additional benefit and will give you an advocate inside. So that's very interesting. And then, of course, there's the pain of the pain, in the sense that some solutions introduce new pains into an organization. Typically, if people adopt a big ERP system, they'll be happy because that ERP system will alleviate some pains and will bring some value. But on the other hand, it will introduce new problems. So that's also one of the things you can play on. Now, pricing, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of factors that influence pricing, right? Typically, there is the value you are offering, but also the kind of customers and kind of clients you are really addressing to. Some markets are used to spending a lot of money on software, for example, or on products in general. Other markets are very, very tight, have themselves very small margins and will not spend a lot of money. It also depends on how you deal with. And costs, of course, it all depends on how your cost structure, you have to take that a bit into account. If you deliver software that requires extreme amounts of server capacity, blah, 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 yeah, you will have to factor these costs in your pricing as well. But yeah, that's so these all influence your pricing. Okay. Now there is research that shows that pricing is a small increase in pricing, take a 1% price increase, can give you on average a 11% of profit increase. So you could think of adding more features or making the product faster or better UX or whatever. It creates more value. But actually, when it comes to profit, just raising your price with 1% might actually create much more leverage and much more profit for you. And that's one of the instruments you as a startup can play with. Together with all the other stuff you can play with. But your pricing there, especially technical people, forget to use that as an instrument to help their business. It's also so that out of the 4 P's in marketing, who knows the 4 P's in marketing? Can you shout them to me? Price is one of them, of course. There's product, yeah. There's, pardon? Place, right? And the last one? Promotion. Kind of. Out of the 4 P's, pricing has the most direct impact. That is something you have under your control. You can change your price at any time. You can do that perfectly. There's virtually, especially in an online world, there's virtually no cost involved with that. You just go in your Stripe backend, new plan, just bit extra, and that's it. Basically, a landing page maybe that you need to change, and that all the others are much harder to influence for yourself. Okay, so that was a bit of general theory on pricing and in economics. Next up, I'll have 11 different pricing methods. Like I said, there is no silver bullet in pricing. There is no single formula. I wish I had it, but There isn't one that says, okay, given all these parameters, plot outcomes, 12 euros a month. Doesn't exist. What I can share with you is like 11 different ways to look at your pricing, and I encourage you to use 2 or 3 or even 4 of these methods to come independently of each other to come to a price, and then use 2 or 3 others to challenge the prices you found, so that you can have the best possible guess for the best possible price for your stuff. Okay, so I promised 11, so that's quite some work to do. Let's start. The first of all is the Silicon Valley rule of thumb. And the idea there is you deliver 10x the value than you charge for. So imagine that by adopting your ERP or your CRM system, you will create an uptake of $10,000 per year. Yeah, charge $1,000 a year. That's the idea of the Silicon Valley rule of thumb. You deliver 10x more value than you try to capture. Of course, again, it's up to you to understand correctly how much your software is, or how much value your software is creating. That again is something you need to understand from your customers. You as a startup, that's your main task is to figure out where the value, how customers perceive the value you're delivering as a software, as a startup. This means also talking to customers, talking to prospects. This means really deep understanding of what the problems are that you're solving. This is typically, these are methods like Lean Startup and everything give you a lot of inspiration there. For us techies, that's damn hard to do, to go outside and talk to people and to work with people and to really understand their thing, especially on a sensitive thing like pricing. But still, it is something to do. Which brings me to technique number 2, customer interviews. You can talk to prospects and customers and try to figure out how they look at your pricing and how they perceive your pricing. Typically, as personally, I find it very awkward to do that, but it is something you have to do. You would not, there's 2 schools of thought there. There's people who say that you should just ask, like, okay, our price is, we charge 500 a month. What do you think about it? Is it too high, too low, blah, blah, blah. There's others who said, no, you don't negotiate really the price, you really work around some range of prices, okay? There's even a person called Peter from Westendorp who made a whole interview methodology where he tries to figure out from, okay, at which price would you consider just outrageously expensive? Which price would you think is ridiculously cheap? At which price would you buy with hesitation because you still find it pretty expensive? And at which price would you consider it a bargain? Like, okay, actually a bit too cheap to be true, too good to be true. Then you have a whole spectrum of prices for your thing. Do such interviews on a regular basis, and you will come up with a range of a price range that is good for your you. Whether that makes your business a viable business is another question, but still, it's a way to determine price. And don't get fooled by people saying to you that you charge too much. Actually, they don't have a price objection. These people have a value objection. They don't understand how much value you will bring them. So again, this brings us back to the value versus cost discussion of earlier. You as a startup really need to understand how much value you create for your customer, and especially in their minds. The better you can show ROI, the better you can show what impact on their top and bottom line your software will have, the easier it is to charge a certain price for it. So always, this is one of my key things that I would take with you. There are no price objections. There are only value objections. Okay. Method number 3, I guess, or 4. I forgot to number them. I think it's 3. The industry benchmark. Look at gross margin. Gross margin is your revenue minus your service costs. So revenue means the money that comes in, And service cost means all the costs that are related to delivering that product or service. So no sales, no R&D, but really like the price of the goods, for example. In the software industry, we have a gross margin of 70 to 95%. I mean, imagine Microsoft, they just, when you buy a copy of Word, now you can even download it, and bandwidth is dirt cheap, so that's actually the only cost that Microsoft has for delivering you Word. They used to print this on CDs and everything, and at the cost of the CD and everything, but that is negligible compared to that 160 euros or whatever you had to pay for your Microsoft license. So gross margins of 70 to 95% are in software business common, especially in the on-premise one. There's probably only drugs that have a similar high, drugs and narcotics that have a similarly high profit margin. For software as a service companies, because you have to run servers and you have to have operational people and databases and backups and blah, 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 margins are a bit lower, 60 to 80%. Why am I telling this? It means that if you do the calculation at given price point, I will get so much revenue, I will have so much cost, blah, 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 and you end up with a gross margin of, say, 25%. You might be doing something wrong. Because on average in the industry, you should be somewhere around 60 to 80% gross margin. A couple of other benchmarks in SaaS, especially in SaaS and software as a service and online business, cost of acquisition is one of these things that is extremely important. What is the cost to acquire a new customer? Hint, it should be as low as possible. Typically, they say that the lifetime value of a customer, so the amount of money, the amount of revenue you will get out of a customer, should be like 3 to 4 times the cost of acquisition. So if you say with Google Ads, you do 50 euros of Google Ads, will give you 1 sign-up, imagine. So you spend 50 euros in Google Ads, and you extract 70 euros out of that customer over his lifetime. Yeah, you might be doing something wrong. Okay, so that's these are a couple of benchmarks you could use, and you could switch your pricing, and of course other parameters as well, but adopt your pricing accordingly. Especially for startups, this is also a very important one, break-even point. At which price point will I be break-even? Typically, as a startup, you'll be investing, first be investing in stuff. I mean, you have to do your customer discovery process, you have to go through your do your interviews, start building your software as well, bribe your first customers into using your thing, maybe even get some money. Well, at which how much money do you have on the bank? How long can you go? And given that at a certain price point you start selling, when will I be bankrupt? How long can I proceed in that? So that's your understanding where your break-even point is as a startup is pretty important. It's also very important when you want to raise money, when you want to go to VCs, that even with that money on the bank, you should still have an idea of where do you break even. Of course, a small change in price will move that point in time dramatically. Okay. Next method, Google Ads. Although I don't, when I do this talk, I sometimes get questions from people like, yeah, do you really advocate to startups that they should be advertising on Google? No, that's not what I'm saying, because frankly, Google advertisement is extremely expensive, especially for startups. But what you can do is do a little experiment. Spend a couple 100, 200 euros on Google Ads and test your sales funnel costs. This will give you a really good idea of how much it would cost to attract customers via a channel like Google Ads. Okay? This will give you a very good idea of cost of sales. And cost of sales, especially in a SaaS business, like I said earlier, is one of those key KPIs, these key things that you need to understand. with just a small Google Ads experiment, you will get an idea of that cost of acquisition, that cost of sales. Yeah. Typically, we have the tendency to really underestimate the cost of acquisition and to say, 50 euros will give us. Well, you should do the test. Probably with like a couple of €100 of AdWords, you'll get some traffic to your site. A bit of that traffic will actually stay longer on your site than a couple of seconds. Out of those, a few will maybe sign up. And out of the few that sign up, maybe one will eventually lead to a real customer that is willing to pay for your service. That's the reality of how online sales is done. Just having an idea of the numbers of these conversion rates between all these steps, gives you a lot of insight. And again, you don't spend gazillion dollars on Google Ads. You just spend a bit to have a feeling there. Pardon? So that's what especially American VCs look at. Cost of acquisition, the lifetime value of a SaaS customer should be at least 3 to 4 times the cost of acquisition. So if you spend 50 euros to acquire a customer, or more realistically 500 or 600 euros, or maybe a couple of thousand euros to acquire a customer, you should get at least 3 to 4 times that amount of money over the course of the life cycle of that customer. Another metric that they use, or rule of thumb that they use, is you should be able to recuperate the cost of acquisition within 12 months. So if I sign up, if I spend 500 euros acquiring the next customer, I should be able to, within 12 months, recuperate that cost. Okay. That's one of the nasty side effects. This is a side note. One of the nasty side effects of a SaaS and a subscription model is that you pay the customer acquisition cost upfront, and you're not even sure whether that individual customer will ever be profitable. But you did spend the cost. Okay. So up to next pricing point, pricing strategy. If you are introducing something new and you charge 500 for it, say you're Apple and you launch this iPad thingy, this tablet thingy, and you say, I'm going to launch this for $4.99. People, because they don't really understand the value of an iPad or a tablet at that time, they had no idea whether 500 euros or dollars or whatever was a lot of money or not. Intuitively, I find that a lot of money, 500. But if you position that to another category, and that's what Apple did during their keynote, and they put that against, say, a MacBook, which starts at $9.99, all of a sudden, these 500 euros start to feel pretty comfortable. I'm only spending half. We humans are we have a problem with absolute values, but we are very good at dealing with relative values. Anchoring is really a means to put this $4.99 into perspective and to put it against something else. Typically, you anchor your stuff against something of a different category. That's why you see some startups on their pricing pages, for the price of just one espresso at Starbucks, you get so much storage for free. So much storage from our service. That's called anchoring. Okay. Another effect, some people think they're a bit the same, but that's different, is a decoy effect. Imagine I have 2 USB sticks. Stick A at 32 gigabytes, $29. Stick B, 64 gigs, $39. Which one would sell most, you think? Which is by best value for money? B. Who thought B? Most of it. Good. Now, imagine I do this. I introduce an 8 gigabyte model. Which do you think is now the best bargain? Still, pardon? Yeah, it's probably the best bargain, but psychologically, the attention shifts to A. So by introducing a decoy, that's USB stick C, you psychologically influence the buying decision, and you influence it clearly. Of course, I don't carry that 8 gigabyte. I don't carry that in my inventory. I don't have these. But by just putting that, I push people more to spend their money on item A. If at some point somebody would order a C, I would gladly accept their money, ship them an USB stick A, and they'd be very happy to have an upgrade there. But that's how a decoy effect gives you things. That's also what you see on pricing pages of a lot of startups or a lot of companies. They have this. They have a smaller plan and a bigger plan, and they have this enterprise all-you-can-eat plan. For a lot of people, they don't want all-you-can-eat, but it makes them appreciate some of these middle plans much more than the others. This one is really also typical. This is very much for the software industry. Buy versus build. You and I know that a lot of software that is out there and that you can find as a service is not that hard to build, right? I mean, especially in these days of cloud computing and APIs everywhere, it's not that hard to build. Still, if you do the math, you can work with a customer to really understand how they look at these costs. You could say, look, actually, Mr. Customer, you would like to have a CRM system, and you are thinking about really building that in-house, or have an agency build something very bespoke for you. In the end, before you know it, you spend 100K, because not on the development itself, but on all the stuff that goes around it, project management, testing, user requirements, blah, 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 blah. And actually, if you use my thing, it will only cost you 10K a year, which means that actually you save, if you work with me, if you take my product, not only will you have the product now and will you be fast, but you also save 90K. That's the kind of reasoning you could use when to deal with buy versus make. Of course, if you realize that your stuff is just 5 lines of code in the end, that could easily be written by that customer, yeah, you know that this kind of reasoning, if you then charge like, what would I say, 50 a month, yeah, you will easily get into trouble there, but still. In the online world, this plays a little less, but still, oftentimes you will not be bringing your software to the market all on your own. A lot of new startups do that, but over time you'll want to work with a whole partner network, resellers, distributors, agents, even companies like Dropbox. They have an affiliate program, they have a partner program, they do that. Of course, all these different partners in the value chain, they also want a little piece of money, a cut there. So if you have a product where you charge, say, 10 euros a month, most of it profit, okay, but 10 euros a month, an agent or an affiliate somewhere along the value chain who gets like half of that money, he will not be doing a lot of effort for you for 5 euros a sale or 3 euros a sale. If he can get 10,000 per sale, then he will start doing business for you. Okay, so you have to adjust your pricing also to take these kind of things into account, especially if you want, if you think you need distributors and a whole value chain to sell your products. Typically, in the software industry, it's often the case that 15 to 20% of your revenue is somewhere, I would say, lost in the value chain, lost at affiliates or things. When I think it was VMware introduced one of their new products a while ago, they had 51% of their revenue that didn't go to them directly, but went into the hands of affiliates and of course, on big deals and expensive software, that's okay. If you have 5 euros a month, there's not much there. Although for some categories where startups play, where competition is virtually non-existent, you can look at the pricing of your competition and position yourself there. Basically, what you do there is, you position yourself somewhere in the low, mid, of high range of that of pricing spectrum. Say for take email marketing tools, yeah, like Mailchimp and the likes. Yeah, they charge typically, what is it, 25 a month or so. Yeah, then you could say, okay, we do 40 or 45, but we offer superior service or whatever, or we are the cheap one, and we are on the low end of the spectrum. So again, looking at your competitors might be an indication, but still, you still should figure out. You should not only look at your competitors, you should also find for yourself, figure out what the right pricing is for you. Another method, industry average. Typically, within your, take for example, my example of the App Store there. For games in the App Store, the average pricing point is, let's say, between $0 and $1 or euro for a game. On the Salesforce marketplace, typically prices of things are there between, let's say, $26 or $30 to $75 per seat, right, per month. So if you do your price calculation and you end up with a price being $277 a month, you fall outside of this range. Now, there might be a very good reason why your stuff falls outside of that range. That's okay. But at least know that within the market, when people just scroll through app stores or that kind of stuff, you'll be a stranger there. You'll be a bit strange there. So that might be a problem. Like I said, in mobile gaming, yeah, that price point is extremely low. That's also why which means that even if you have a decent game, you still need to, you simply cannot charge $20 for it. You have to do all these bloody in-game app thingies to extract money out of your users. Okay, this was method 11. Point is, I gave 11 different ways to look at your pricing. None of these is the absolute truth. So I would say apply a couple of these on your offering, cross-check it with a couple of the other ones, and see whether then you come to a consistent pricing. And in the end, bottom line is, if customers are unwilling to pay a decent price for your software, it's mostly because you're not articulating the value enough. You're not explaining well enough how much they will gain by using your software. It's often not the case that your pricing is wrong. Okay, let's look at multi-access pricing. That's also typically for SaaS and online products. Typically, 2 or 3 access are used. An access called typically like users. An access called on features. For example, for the premium package gets these and these features extra. Or somewhere on usage, like how much storage, or Dropbox typically storage kind of things. Salesforce, for example, they use basically 2 axes. They differentiate their price on users and on the number of features you're using. That's basically it. The engineer in us will go overboard with how many axes you introduce and how many different variations you will do. I would recommend 2 or 3 axes maximum. Our brain, or the brain of a normal buyer, is simply not wired to deal with very complex thingies. So 2 or 3 axes is really the maximum you could use for your pricing. Voilà. A couple of strategies for on pricing. First, somebody already mentioned it earlier: price elasticity. Price elasticity means how much elasticity is on the price. How a small change in price, how much will it influence the buying of your customers? It might be that customers are extremely price sensitive, and the slightest increase in price will cause customers not to buy from you anymore. It might also be that, frankly, people, whether you charge this price or double, they'll still keep on buying from you. That's all. That's elasticity. It's very well You have to understand how much space there is on your pricing. Okay. Another tactic you can use is discounts. You can convince maybe a customer by offering a discount that will influence his buying decision. Now, never ever give eternal discounts. Always, as a startup, and especially in a SaaS model, in a recurring business model, always give prices with a timing constraint. For example, because you are an early adopter, Mr. Customer, I can offer you the first year at half the price or at 70% of the price, but only for the first year or the first number of the first 5 users, and then from then on, you'll start, the 6th user will start paying the full price. So be very aware that with how you discount. Luckily, platforms like Stripe, for example, for billing platforms, they have all sorts of support to allow you to experiment with coupons and with discounts. So that's very handy for us. And last, another thing you could, especially when it's more enterprise software, users might not just adopt your software, but they will have to maybe do some integration, maybe some customization, some configuration. There might be a significant amount of work involved from your part and from the customer's part to start using your software. And especially as a startup, where these kind of contacts are extremely valuable, both from a financial point of view, but also from like I want to learn from my customer point of view. You are, as a startup, thinking about, often tempted to do these things for free. Never, ever do these things for free, except if it's like half a day of work or so. But if it's a bit of significance, if it's a real project, if it's a real pilot, charge for that. Not necessarily the full price, not necessarily making a profit of it, but really I encourage you to put these things on paper, to make a real contract and to really charge for it. There is nothing as rewarding, by the way, as being a small startup than selling something and getting money from customers. There's, regardless of what friends and people and investors tell you that you're doing great, it's the ultimate validation, whether you as a startup are doing something right or not, is money from customers coming in. Okay. Up until now, I talked a lot about SaaS, because that's also the world the kind of startups that I'm mostly using. But there's, of course, other types of startups. There's startups that are more marketplaces. Things like Airbnb, PayPal, these kind of companies. They are multi-sided platforms. They are marketplaces. They bring buyers and sellers of certain goods together. Typically, you as a company will have different pricing strategies towards these different segments. Take an Airbnb, they profile themselves different towards people who are renting Airbnbs than people who are looking for Airbnbs. Same with PayPal. They have different face towards merchants than towards end users of PayPal. Typically, also in this kind of context, your pricing will be different towards different sides of your group, and you might your target audiences, and you might actually have to subsidize some of your segments there. Okay. Good. Let's see. Okay. Let's talk free and freemium. In the end, freemium, giving part of your software or part of your solution for free, eternally for free, is a model that a lot of people are very much in favor of that. You can't beat free, right? I personally think that freemium definitely has its place, but when you are into a freemium model, your goal should be T's, P's, and C's. In the end, you want to please your users, and then you want to grab them and make them paying users. Right? Because out of these free users, except when you get some other kind of value out of these users, in the end they cost you money. They are not necessarily the ones who will keep your business afloat, right? The conversion rates from freemium to the premium model are in general pretty low. I would say dramatically low. Any idea of, for example, a Flickr, what the conversion rate there is between their free tier and then the people who convert up to the paying?
Less than 1%.
Some of them are even less than 1%. If you reach 10%, that will be already super. Yeah? Of course, there are companies like, for example, LinkedIn, the free tier of LinkedIn, which most of us are on. Of course, they extract real value out of that free tier, because that's generating all that data is then sold to recruiters and whatever along the way. So in that sense, in such a model, that freemium model is has a strategic importance of them. It gives them the body. But for a classical software as a service part, take Buffer or something like that, that free tier is actually costing them a lot of money. So I would say, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go freemium, but as a startup, start with the premium part first, right? I know a lot of startups who postpone that moment where they could start charging, and they say, yeah, but we'll do the premium first, but before you know it, you're 1 year later and still don't know whether 20 a month is actually a lot or so start with the premium part first. I have here a couple of conversion rates from premium to freemium. For example, Dropbox is 4%, MailChimp is at 13%, Skype is at 8%. Evernote, which is one of those poster childs when it comes to the freemium model, is at 6%. Spotify is at 10%. So 90% of people using Spotify will never pay for it. That's why you are bombarded with ads. And Flickr is apparently like 10% or so. Okay. Which brings me to my final words. I've got do's and I've got don'ts. Do's is your price. You should price is part of the research you as a startup have to do. Yeah, there is also the research about who is my customer and what are my product features and blah blah blah. But price is one of those key things you need to research as well. And in the end, it's like most of the things in your startup. It's a continuous process. You have to rethink your pricing or reconsider your pricing or revisit your pricing on a regular basis. It's not something you set and then forget. The better you understand your customer, the better you understand what value they can derive out of your solution, the easier it is for you to charge and to justify your price and to make a decent sales argumentation. I would always look at industry gross margins as a reference point, as a benchmarking point. Like I said, if your gross margin of a SaaS business is 25%, you're probably doing wrong because all the others have a gross margin between 60 and 80%. So you're leaving you're doing something wrong. Maybe you're leaving too much money on the table. Maybe your costs are too high, blah, 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 but there's something wrong. Use these industry gross margin benchmarks. Use all sorts of tactics, multiple price plans. Don't forget that oftentimes, even the big SaaS companies who have their nicely laid out pricing pages, they have this enterprise thingy, which means that, which in the end is call me and we'll negotiate a price. Yeah, you can use that kind of tactics as well. If you look at the metrics of Buffer, who knows Buffer? That's a Twitter client kind of thingy. They are extremely open and transparent about everything they do. One of the things that they have is you can see their revenue and their payments and everything come in real time. They use Baremetrics, one of these dashboarding tools for Stripe payments. And Buffer publishes that. If you just look at the list of pricing plans they have custom pricing plans with only one customer on it, which means that if there is room for bargaining there. Consider partnerships. You might not be doing everything on your own, but if you use partners, make sure that there is money to be made by them as well. Never start out with the freemium part. Always start with the premium part. I covered that as well. It might be tempting to introduce transactional billing kind of things, but transactional billing only works in sectors where transactional is the norm. For example, if you are in e-commerce or so, there, of course, a sell is a transaction on your site. So it's logical that you would take a cut on that. But if you are in a regular CRM system, don't make it don't make it transactional. Make it recurring monthly, typically. And don't forget that pricing is a function of marketing. It means that you should be considered that as part of product management. Treat it like that, okay? And regardless of your ideal price and the ideal world, there is something like cash flow, the amount of money that's on your bank, that kind of stuff. Companies die because of problems in cash flow, so sometimes you have to be pragmatic, sell a bit lower, put your price point lower, but make it easier for cash to come in, and that keeps your startup afloat longer. After the do's, 10 don'ts, set it and forget it. So, of course, at one point you will have to set a price, but revisit it regularly, right? Especially in an online world with software as a service, with things like Stripe, changing your price there's technically no reason why not every 2 or 3 months revisit your pricing and maybe adopt. Never ever cut prices to sell more. The startup graveyard is full with startups who said, okay, we'll do half the price and then we'll start selling more. Like I said, there are no things. There is no such thing as a pricing objection. There's only value objections. So, if you're building something nobody wants, making the price half will not make people want it all of a sudden. So, startups and we in general tend to overestimate the customer lifetime value. We think that once they sign up and people start using our software, that they will be customers for life. Reality is that for a lot of online software and SaaS software, these customer lifetime values are very short or very low. Again, if you look at Buffer, for example, their customer lifetime value is like $100 and a bit. This is not a lot of money. You need a lot of customers to build a sustainable business out of that. Don't ask clients for ballpark pricing. So if you are negotiating with a customer, be sure that you are a bit in control of the kind of pricing you would charge for it. Don't say to customer, what would it be worth for you? They will fool you and they will fool you on the spot. Understand your cost structure, and especially in a SaaS business, servers and that kind of stuff. That's the easy part. You can get that from the cloud on demand, so that's not an issue. But don't underestimate cost of sales, cost of acquisition, and that kind of stuff. So never use more than 3 axes for pricing. Never give discounts that are not limited in time. Just make sure that you limit in time so that after a year you can renegotiate the pricing with your customer. Never do pilot projects for free because you will be nailed. And never use freemium as a vanity metrics. It's not because you have 10,000 users for your things, out of which 9,950 don't pay for it, that you're doing great. Yeah, a lot of people use the number of users they have or the number of signups as we are growing fast and everything. If these are free users, you could really argue what is that worth. And if you are in a more complex model, typically two-sided or multi-sided platforms and marketplaces, be sure to subsidize the right part of the market and not if you would subsidize the wrong part of it, the part that is of least sensitive to pricing, you're bleeding money rather than gaining money. All of that stuff we wrote in a book. Actually, my colleague wrote it in a book. It's called Lean Pricing. It's a very nice piece of work. You can order it today if you want. And that's me. Voila. I hope I gave you an idea of what to think about when you as a startup are thinking about your pricing. I have 4 minutes left, so if somebody has a question or a remark or whatever, just shoot and I'll try to give an answer on the spot. Questions? Yeah.
should you take volume less in account as a startup? So the volume of the product you're selling.
Should you take volume into account when you say
In account
of less?
less as a startup.
You mean charge for the resources, your or usage of or so, or what do you how
The amount of product you are selling
the
will probably sell less at the start.
pardon?
Startups will probably sell less product at the start.
Yeah.
You should take volume less in account.
Well, what I wouldn't say it like that. I would say if you have a pricing point of 10 euros a month, say, and you say, okay, I need in the end 5-6 people to keep this to keep this thing going, you can calculate how much volume you should start to generate over time to make it a profitable business, right?
Yeah.
At 10 euros a month, you'll need quite some customers to start paying for one developer, to start paying for a DevOps guy or a sales guy, right? Which means that if you feel you will have a hard time selling this thing like 2,000 or 3,000 times, yeah, then there's something wrong. Then you don't have a viable business. Of course, you will not get 2,000 or 3,000 sales, even not in an online world, just like that, right? So that will take time to ramp up your sales machine, to build also the kind of product that people like, to do your marketing, blah blah blah. So there, your burn rate and your break-even point comes into play. How much time do you estimate you need to get to your 3,000 sales? How much money do I have in the bank? How can I speed that up? So these are the kind of things you need to think about.
Okay, and in the same topic, what is the usual expected time until you break even? I've heard 2 years, for example.
It all depends. It depends also. It depends on your cost structure, for example. So the question was how much time does it typically take until you are break even? Again, that depends a lot. If you are building a technically relatively simple thing, and you do that after hours, yeah, you can go on quite indefinitely. Okay, so because you're not having. But if you are building something that is close to rocket science, where you need hardcore hardcore full-time R&D team, and blah blah blah, yeah, it will take them say a year to build that thing. Yeah, you know, you'll need a lot of cash.
So you should take someone else's money initially.
You should find ways to bootstrap, that's for sure. Problem with taking other people's money is that people will not invest in you unless you show something, unless you show traction typically.
Well, that's not true.
Well,
Especially investing small amounts is quite popular lately.
yeah, okay, but
It's a good, an interesting, you know.
yeah,
idea.
of course there are you have angels and blah, but that stuff will only get you so far. And again, depending on the kind of product you are building, the amount of time you need to build something tangible and to get your first income, yeah, you will jump far with 50,000 euros, or you will just take you to next week. Depends basically on okay. Yeah, what you?
Do you have any experience about pricing model for a software that is open source? Any recommendation?
Again, it is all about what are you offering. In that case, in an open source model, you'll probably not be charging for the software as such, but you'll charge for the services around it. So typically, I'm cutting a lot of corners, but typically you are in such a model, you are selling people, you are selling expertise, and well, you're selling hours basically, right? Which means that again, on average, you will have your biggest cost will be salaries, will be the people you have to pay, and yeah, you have to have a markup there. Yeah.
You said we shouldn't do the freemium model. So if I have two options, one is I have 5 paying customers that are supporting my business, or otherwise I have 10,000 free customers. If I go and ask for cash, you know, an investor, and I go with 5 paying customers that fully support my business, they're gonna say, yeah, you're not growing fast enough. If I go with 10,000 customers that will never eventually become paying customers, they'll say, oh, okay, that's a nice idea. You're the next Facebook and give you money.
That might not be the case. If you are in the first case and you have 5 paying customers that make you that you have a viable business, you don't need external money. Eh? You can work.
At some point, you know that you're growing too slow.
Yeah.
You want to invest in something big, the next milestone, the next big milestone. So at some point, you want to just jump a little bit. You know, you want to hire 10 people, but with the rate you're growing, it's going to happen in 5 years. So you want to skip the 5 years because you know the idea is good. You need just the salaries, someone to pay for the salaries. So you're ready to share, I don't know, 10% of your company for the cash. Because until now, you've been a viable company.
Well, first disclaimer, I'm not a VC. So I'm not investing myself, although I talk a lot. I talk with VCs and everything. But of course, it all depends about the kind of risks VCs are willing to take. And typically, if you raise money for growth and for acquiring customers, it helps that you can illustrate that you have a working growth engine, that you have a working mechanism for growing, right? So that they know that if they pump arbitrary number 10K in you, that 10K will generate that amount of users. And in the end, also that amount of business. It all depends on your business model. If you are in a SaaS model, software as a service, yeah, in the end, what counts there is how much monthly recurring revenue do you get in. So if you have a business with 10,000 non-paying customers, you prove that you have made something that at least 10,000 people like, but you completely missed proving that people are willing to spend a dime on it. So I, as a VC, would say, okay, come back to me when you have like when you can convert 5% of these people from freemium to premium, and then I'll start. That will give me more confidence that if you have more an advertisement-based model, like the Facebooks in this world, which I would call a pay never model, yeah, then of course everything is growth. But still, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the new hype.
Yeah, but these things only work in Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have to wrap up. It's time. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be in the lobby for a while, so good.